Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Meerbach. I'm the guidance director here at the high school. Thank you all for coming here tonight. So for post-secondary planning night, we're going to go over a lot of four-year college information, but we're also going to talk about other options for students, including military, two-year schools, technical schools, things like that. But the focus is clearly on the four-year college aspect of post-secondary planning. So presenting tonight is going to be myself and also Karen Goff, who's standing over there, and Jim Shannon, also school counselors here at the high school. And we also have some college folks with us tonight. So we have Greg Meyer. He's from Bridgewater University, Dean of University Admissions. We also have Chris O'Brien. He's from Boston College, the Director of Undergraduate Admissions. And then we have Joe Dacey from Stonehill College, the Dean of Admissions and Enrollments. So I want to make this more interactive. So as we go through the presentation, after most slides, I'm going to kick it over to the college admissions folks to give their opinion and feedback on that slide. And then during the presentation, if you have questions, please ask. So if I go over strength of transcript and you have a question about strength of transcript, don't wait until the end of the presentation. Just raise your hand and we'll answer that question in the moment. And then after the presentation, I'm going to give them each a few minutes, if they so desire, to speak about their respective schools and anything else about the college admissions process. And then after that, we'll have any other questions and answers, and then we'll be on our way. All right. So, factors to consider when you're looking at college. Location. Is it an urban school? Is it a suburban school? Is it a rural school? The size of the school, medium, small, medium, large. Academics, do they offer my major? Which school has the best program for me? Some bigger schools have more majors and more diversity, and diversity in terms of academics. So if you're going to school and you're not sure what your major is going to be, sometimes a big school is better than a small school because you'll have more options when you do decide on a major. Admissions, how do my grades and scores compare? We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but how do my grades compare? How do my test scores compare? Is this a good school that's a good fit for me on an academic level? Is it a reach school? Is it a safety school? Financial aid, can I afford to attend this school? A lot of folks think that, the general rule and what people think, and sometimes you're right, is that public schools are cheaper than private schools, but that's not always the case. So we encourage our students, when we had our junior seminars in December, we encourage our juniors to consider all schools in the beginning. You don't know what the net result is going to be from your financial aid package. Private schools can often offer more in merit scholarships and be cheaper than public schools in some instances. So it's important not to eliminate a school because you think it might be more expensive or the tuition's too much. I mean, that's something that you can make a decision on after you get into the school and see the awards letters, but up front, when you're thinking about schools, it shouldn't be a primary factor in terms of where you're going to apply. And then, of course, there's other factors. The culture of the campus is very important. Is it a good personal fit? As much as it's important for a college to be an academic fit, the personal fit's very important too. You're going to be spending 4 years of your life living on this campus or near this campus, and you want to make sure that you're in a place where you want to be. So if you're not happy, you're not going to do well in school either. The diversity of the student body, extracurricular activities. Do they have activities or clubs you're interested, or sports? Are you interested in sports teams? That's something that could be a good personal fit as well. All right. So the first area that I want to talk about is strength of transcript. So strength of transcript often gets overlooked a little bit. It's one of the most important parts of your college application. A lot of folks kind of, I wouldn't say get hung up, but they think about the GPA and think about your test scores, and you think of those two data points, and that's something that gets a lot of focus and a lot of attention. And strength of transcript is something that might not get as much attention, but it's extremely important. So by strength of transcript, I mean level of the coursework taken. So whether it's a college prep course, an honors course, an AP course, those are 3 different levels. The number of core courses that you take each year. Students should be taking a minimum of at least 4 core courses a year, preferably 5. The grades in the classes taken, and a progression that you show over high school. And by progression, I mean progression in grades. And so if you had a bad freshman year and you had C's and D's, did your grades get better sophomore, junior, and senior year? Did they stay the same? They get worse. So you want to show an upward progression there if possible. A progression in level. So if you started out with college prep classes, did you try an honors class? If you started out with honors classes, did you try an AP class? So Pembroke High School offers about 13, 14 AP courses. Did you try any of those courses? It's open enrollment. So if you pushed yourself in the curriculum, that's showing progression in level. And then progression in core courses. Do you continue to take 4 or 5, maybe even 6 core courses a year, or did you have a really easy senior year, took only 2 or 3 core courses? So that's what strength of transcript means. College folks?
Are you going to stand when you talk? Well, yeah, okay. I was just asking. We're starting. I should. So I'll start off by thank you for having us here tonight. I usually give a little intro of myself just because I think I come from a little different perspective in that I'm really old, and you probably can see that. But I've been doing admissions now for over 30 years. I've been at Bridgewater for about 13 years. I guess I'm into my 14th year. Here in Massachusetts, I'll be representing Bridgewater State University and how we do things, obviously, at Bridgewater. But also, we're kind of mandated by the State Board of Higher Education, all of the public institutions here in Massachusetts. So I'll be sharing information, not only how we do things at Bridgewater, but also how, most specifically, how we do things at the other 8 state colleges and universities, the Fitchburgs, Framinghams, Westfields, that list, as well as the UMass campuses. And we don't interact as much with the UMass campuses, but again, we all adhere to this state standard of how we're doing things. In fact, I just met with the other 8 deans and directors of admissions of the other state colleges and universities last week. So we're definitely all on the same page of how we're doing things, okay? So again, I'll try to give that kind of bigger perspective, not just Bridgewater, but how we're doing it here in the Commonwealth, as well as, and these guys have heard this a lot, I've had 3 kids that have gone through the process, so I'll also talk a little bit about what we've learned going through this process. My wife and I sat in audiences like this as well, even thinking we knew everything because I've been doing this for so long. My wife is a high school guidance counselor. We think we know everything, but we've definitely learned a lot as we've gone through this process. So specifically, strength of schedule, we in the state system do things a little bit differently as we actually recalculate your students' high school grade point averages, okay? Chris, I think we'll talk, you guys do it a little bit differently, I believe. So we will take their grades from high school, basically 4 points for an A, and on down. If it's an honors course, we give it an extra half a point. If it's an AP course, we give it a full point. So we're calculating that GPA, and that is by far the most important thing in our process. We've calculated that GPA. That's how we're kind of calculating that strength of schedule. It's calculated into every course you've taken and how well you've done in those courses, okay? So I think I'll leave it at that and pass it along.
So again, my name's Joe Dacey. I'm from Stonehill. We're your closest private Catholic college. And I want to save a couple interesting things for Chris to say. But the only thing to echo what Mr. Mirabach had suggested around progression and strength of schedule. Certainly for us, similar to the state school, we do recalculate your GPA. But that strength of curriculum, the courses you chose to take, whether they're honors or AP, matter a great deal. We're never, ever looking at the GPA in isolation. It's always looked at in tandem and holding hands with the courses you chose to take, the 4 to 5 core courses each 4 years, and whether you've added some rigor. The progression matters as much in terms of the GPA. So as you became a more proficient high school student, did you not only perform a little bit better, but did you take advantage of those opportunities to challenge yourself? So you'll see A lot of times students who got into the college prep did well, stayed with college prep all the way through, and that's great. But the strength of program matters just as much. So if you've mastered a certain level, indeed in an open enrollment sort of context when those APs and honors being available, did you raise your hand and take advantage of those opportunities to challenge yourself a little bit more? Certainly in our review process, while the academics drive in terms of ultimate decision making and of course merit scholarship opportunities, those choices, those harder choices that you make to select classes that are going to push your limits a little bit more, show us you're more ready for a college level of rigor, and you've shown some tenacity in the choices and the level of work and time you're willing to commit to your high school. So that's what I'll add, and I'll let Chris kind of sum up.
Sure. And I'm flattered you think I'd had anything extra interesting to say. It's great to be here. I love you guys. Since the divorce, I've been coming to Pembroke High School every year. That's the divorce from Silver Lake, not mine. I'm happily married to an admissions counselor. So when I look at this, I mean, this is the bread and butter of what we do, right? We're trying to find out how smart you are. And how smart you are, especially in an open enrollment situation, is by what kind of challenge are you up for in the classroom. You're going to hear a lot of things tonight about how applications are evaluated by different kinds of places. But it's a lot about performance. It's not as much as you think about potential. It's about performance. You might think you're really smart, but get all C's and just know that some college is, Harvard, you're going to go there, Harvard, and keep it real, even though you're a straight C. No, Harvard won't admit you if you're a straight C student, I can tell you. They're interested in performance. And that right there tells us about performance. And maybe for all of you athletes, if I wanted to find out who the best 18 soccer players are at Pembroke High School, would I be looking at the JV team? Nope. They're all on the varsity team. You might think that you're on JV and you're one of the best 18 players on the soccer team. You're not. The varsity kids are. That's how you get to varsity. So as you go to more rigorous application processes, as you apply to more selective colleges, they're looking for varsity players. There's nothing wrong with JV, and JV soccer players are fine players. And there are programs for JV players, and there are programs for students that are in all those levels at a Pembroke High School, which is a good high school. But as you get more selective, as you're looking at elite institutions, they expect varsity performances. And that's the difference between being on those different levels. That doesn't mean that you're supposed to take these courses if you can't handle them. An F in an honors course is not a badge of courage, it's a mistake. But if you are willing to take that challenge and you're concerned about the distinction that being in an honors or AP course will give you, when I'm trying to find out who the best kids are at school, I'm looking at who are in the more rigorous courses. Then I'm looking at their grade performances in those courses, just like if I was looking for athletes at a particular school. I thought the athletic thing would drive it home.
All right. Next slide is on basically Mass state requirements. So to give you an idea of kind of what core courses are required, these are what's called Mass core requirements. So a unit is, this is the terminology from the state, but a unit is considered a year course. So 4 units of English, 4 units of math through Algebra 2, 3 units of science with lab, 3 units of history including US, 2 units of foreign language in the same single language, and then 1 of an art program, then 5 from other core requirements, business, health, technology, and electives. And then this is for Mass state schools, so that's to kind of give you some perspective on the expectations of core courses. When you get to private schools, that's going to vary a little bit. Some might not even have a foreign language requirement at a private school. Some private schools might have a 3 or 4 year requirement. So those do vary. English and math, you're not going to see a lot of variance on that, but the other core courses do vary a bit.
Just real quick, these are important points. and to go back to the first original slide, when you're talking about college search, sometimes people direct their search by what major or what profession they want to go into. I would caution all of you on that. When I was a junior at BC High, I never thought I'd be an admissions counselor. I thought that was creepy and boring, and here I am, 20-something years later, being an admissions counselor. And a lot of the parents that are in here are doing something that is fulfilling that they never ever thought they would do. Now, I was a history major in college. I loved my history teachers in high school, and I hope some of you do too. And while, in a way, I'm a failure as a history major, in another way, I'm exactly doing what I'm supposed to be doing, because what do? I read applications, and what are applications? They're histories. So in some ways, I'm perfectly trained for what I was doing. It's just never what I intended. I followed what I liked to do, and that was cultivated in high school by having good classes and going to history club meetings and acting upon my passions. Some of you know you're supposed to be a nurse. Some of you design like an architect, but a lot of you have no idea. And you need to rely on us in college to inspire and to inform and to tell you, even if it's bad news, because if you fail organic chemistry, no one wants you to be the doctor. So that's some of the stuff that happens in college. But the reason why I bring it up is actually because of this slide. Because if you say that you want to be a nurse and you stop at 3 years of science and don't do 4, you're not as prepared for nursing programs as you could be. And what is that saying to us? If you want to study business, which is very quantitative and math-driven, and you only have the bare minimum in mathematics, what is that saying to the college that you're applying specifically for a program that's going to ask you to do more in that specific area? So I would tell you that there are going to be some places that want you to take 4 years of everything. But I'd also say that if you're applying with a specific goal in mind, a profession, a major in college, and you don't do as much as you can to prepare for that particular major, like you want to be a French major and you only take 2 years of French, like that puts doubt in my mind. And you don't want to put doubt in admissions people's mind about the authenticity or how serious you are about a specific program when you apply to college. Okay?
I'll just quickly add to this, I think, because it started off by saying this Mass State University requirements. I did bring a flyer with me outside. Some of you may have picked it up when you came in. So you can take that with you. If you didn't get it as you came in, make sure you take it as you go out. But it's something I put together for, again, all of the state colleges and universities, the public sector here in Massachusetts, and it really outlines what our minimum standards are, okay, and that's pretty important. So you have to have taken these courses in high school, and the one I just want to emphasize is the 4 years of math, but we do require that you take a math your senior year of high school. So if you got ahead, and took like something in 8th grade or doubled up a year and got all the way through calculus in junior year and decide not to take something senior year, you don't meet our minimum standard. Okay, so it's pretty important to us that you're looking at that and seeing what those standards are. Again, because this is, I'm hoping that each of you probably throw out at least one application to one of the state colleges and universities because we're cheaper. It could come down to that. But as you're doing that, make sure that you do look at those minimum standards. And again, this is what's most important to us, is what you took. And then after that is when we look at your grades and SAT scores, things like that. It's all right to go ahead with questions, right? Yeah. Yes? Sure. The question is, why wouldn't it count if they double up to meet that core requirement? It counts towards the 4 years. But what we've found, and what the state has found in their studies, is that when students go off to college, we are going to require students to take math in college. We're all liberal arts universities, so we're going to have a core curriculum, and you're going to have requirements of math. And studies show that if students take that senior year off of math, they struggle when they get to college. So we're trying to avoid that by encouraging them to continue that sequence. And this is only specifically in math. We need those other units, but math, that 4th unit has to be that senior year. Okay?
Want me to start? Yeah. So the question regarding, is certainly within the context of the state colleges and universities, and the fact that a lot of colleges out there and every school, and that's one of the things that make this a little complicated, is going to have a slightly different policy on this. Whether there's a slightly different policy on which courses they expect, what counts, whether or not they recalculate the GPA, what's sort of interpreted as a rigorous curriculum versus not, it depends. And that's one of the toughest things. We're all a little different. So I think the expectation we're putting on families and you all as students is that this requires a lot of research because there's a lot of different nuanced elements of it that change from one school to the next. One of the bigger ones is the standardized testing thing. And as coming from a college that is what we would call SAT optional, that's a confusing thing. I'll confess that that's a confusing thing because SAT optional, like some of the other things, is going to mean something different everywhere. In our process, both in review for admission to the school and in our consideration for our merit scholarship process, we are what I call liberally test optional. So if students feel as though their standardized tests are a good reflection of the level of preparation they've had in high school and an indication of how well they'll do in college, submit your scores. If they do not feel that way, don't submit your scores. We require nothing else and hold a student harmless in our review if they don't submit their scores. That's our policy. You're going to get something different out of every one of the other schools that you might be looking at. Some schools might require you to submit an additional piece of writing or a graded piece of work from your English class. There's little, again, policies that are going to change from one school to another. Our justification in doing this, and every school, again, going to have a little different take, is that the best predictor of how well a student will do when they arrive on our campus at Stonehill, both in our liberal arts and pre-professional programs, is how well they pushed on the last slide. The level of rigor, pushing through the senior year, and GPA together. That's the best predictor of how successful a student will ultimately be. But again, it varies. I'll also say, within the context of it varies, so do the averages. And I can say to a student, if you feel as though it's a good indication of the work you've done and how well you'll do it. But the footnote is, every one of us is going to have a pretty transparent page on our admission site of what our averages are. What is the range of a student who's admitted, and what is the range of a student who's been offered some type of merit funding, potentially? That's really want to go and say, how do my scores measure up? And this goes back to the varsity JV sort of metaphor, which I think was great, because you want to see where you fall in the context of that team's competitiveness or that school's competitiveness. How do your scores measure up to their average admitted or their average merit scholarship student? So again, it requires a little bit of research, but you kind of have to align your experience with your tests and with your curriculum and reconcile that against the different types of schools that you're looking for and what their individual policy might be. I don't know that I provided clarity or as much verified that there is confusion around this. Is that? Yeah.
Chris a chance to answer that too, of how they do it at BC. But I think I would also like to add, I try to give the big picture, and we're here representing 3 institutions, but we are trying to give you help through this whole process as well. And this is something I think we've said at almost all these presentations, whenever we get questions, the first thing that probably comes out of our mouth is, well, it depends on a lot of different factors and what we're looking at and what college you're looking at and what's your specific student's background. But with SAT requirements or SAT optional, right now in the state system, we're kind of testing things out a little bit. And what I mean by that is up until last year, we had this state mandate, which is that flyer that I gave, which said you have to have these courses, this GPA. If your GPA is above a 3.0, you meet our minimum standard, but you still have to submit an SAT score. If your SAT or if your GPA is below a 3.0, then it goes into this sliding scale and you have to have a corresponding SAT. So it's all outlined there pretty much for the student. But the kind of tricky part of there, it says, well, if you're above a 3.0, you're admissible. It doesn't matter what your SAT is, but you still have to submit it. Starting last year, the state has piloted a few programs where colleges are trying the no test option philosophy. Because same as we've been saying, that performance in high school over 4 years and how well you do is definitely the #1 indicator. But there are other indicators too. Someone that performs well and tests well generally is pretty strong, you know. So that's a reason we kind of look at both. But with this no test option, last year it was Salem State University and UMass Lowell piloted it, and now a couple other schools this year have jumped on board, and Bridgewater State University is one of those institutions, as well as Mass Art, and I believe the other one is Mass Maritime. No, that's not right. Anyway, I think there's one other in there. But anyway, we are now giving students the option to not submit SAT scores. But it gets tricky, because reality is, well, if you're not submitting an SAT score, well, then your grades better be strong, okay? In fact, in the past, or really as we're implementing this, we found that students don't trust us when we say, it doesn't really matter what your SAT score is, as long as you have above the 3.0. You know, they're still concerned with that. So that's one of the reasons we at Bridgewater decided to go test optional, because now we have the opportunity to let students know that it really doesn't matter. You don't even have to submit them. Whereas in past years, if they had that strong GPA, we were probably still admitting them, even though they submitted an SAT. Now we're not requiring it, okay? But I just want to emphasize that as you're looking at those other schools that may be test optional, if you're not submitting an SAT score, then your grades better be pretty strong, right? Okay, because with us, sometimes students that grades aren't very strong, but their SAT helps them, because they did have, you know, stronger SATs. So that's how and again, so the state system is kind of, you know, testing the waters with this no test option as we move forward.
So I'm put in the position of defending the SAT. And this is on camera. So I'm put in the position of defending the SAT. Well, how about if I just say, I could defend it a number of ways. I could say, in my business, all I see are A- students. What's the difference between an A- student at Pembroke, from an A- kid at Falmouth, from an A- kid in Seattle? Knowing about their school, okay, a little bit. Having them write an essay, sure, we'll talk about it. But how about if I had something else that every kid that applied to Boston College had, and I could use that to help measure? You know, people in other parts of the country or the world weren't born with a number 2 pencil in their hand. Like, you're not at a disadvantage. You're in Massachusetts, which is the state that has the highest testing average in the nation, and you're at Pembroke High School, which is higher than the state's average in terms of a high school population. You're one of the haves. You should look forward to the SAT, because in some Indian reservations in South Dakota, they're not prepared for the SAT, nor are they in the Bronx, nor are they in most other places around the country. The test of your education, the test of the resources that are put towards your kids, is by sitting in a room and putting on paper what they know from their teachers and from their peers. I think you should look forward to that advantage, just as you should look forward to writing an essay, because your writing skills are better than most other high school students in the country. So I don't think we should be afraid of these objective tests or objective measures. They matter, because you're in the top 50%. Other people are concerned with what kids at Pembroke High are doing, because they don't have what you guys have. So that's number one. Number two is most people are going to be taking standardized tests a lot more. People say, oh, my SATs stink, and I really want to be a lawyer. Well, listen, pal, you're going to be taking the LSAT in 4 years. You might be able to get past to college, but at law school, they're going to, when you tell them you're not a good test taker, they're going to say, well, sorry, you can't be a lawyer. I mean, there has to be some objective means. There has to be. At least as far as we're concerned. I have said in my career, I'm sorry, you weren't admitted to Boston College, and it was your standardized testing that was a factor. And, you know, don't just take Boston College's word for it. There's a few other pretty good schools that have decided to hold true to the standardized testing mark. Decent places around the country. And we still determined that, you know, you can follow, you know, the top 5% of test takers with the top 5% of high school students in America go to college and they achieve. So the test isn't inverted in terms of potential. It's congruent with the things that we find in the classroom. Usually the top 5% of students at Pembroke are going to score in the top 5% of testers in the country. It's pretty consistent. In those cases where it's different for all of us, if the salutatorian of the class at Pembroke has a very modest testing profile, that puts the pressure on us to find out what that student's all about. That's where admissions people get the huge, exorbitant salaries that we earn. Because we can really get our hands in and say, why is this kid who does everything they want in the building fall short in this one area? And usually, when we can look at everything together, if we are satisfied with all the other indicators, we can set aside one indicator. But what we sometimes fear is the reliance that people put on standardized testing when they're juniors as a way to either make up inconsistencies in their high school record or prove to us there's something they're not. You know, many times in our business, we see students that have off-the-charts SATs or ACTs and very mediocre to poor performance in high school. We don't usually look fondly on that because that's an underachiever or a student that's gamed the system to get a high achieving score but doesn't have the grit and the work to do the day-to-day in the classroom. I don't deny what my colleague said. The indicator that helps most is performance in the high school. But for the most part, that will find its way onto a number 2 pencil sheet on a Saturday morning, whether it's the ACT or the SAT. So again, I find myself, it's hard to defend college testing, you know, because it's not a perfect process. But I do want to tell you that it's used in the right way. And you guys should look forward to it because of what you have here and what you're able to do here at Pembroke High School.
All right. The next slide I was going to talk about was grade point average, GPA. Pembroke High School includes all classes in GPA. Pembroke High School has a weighted 5.0 GPA model. So a lot of colleges will level out a GPA or recalculate a GPA based on a 4.0 scale, or perhaps in a way that works best for them. Pembroke High School has a 5.0 model, so that means we weight each level by half a point. So say you had a B in an English college prep class, that would be a 3.0. If you were taking an honors English class and you had a B, that would be a 3.5, and then if it was an AP course, an AP English course, and you had a B, that would be a 4.0 in the GPA. So that's what we mean by weighted, and we use a 5.0 model for our GPA. Like I said, colleges often recalculate it, and I'll get your feedback as to who recalculates and who doesn't and why. But GPA is important, but it can offset. It's a GPA is important, but can be offset by strength of transcripts or standardized test scores. So if you did have a slightly lower GPA, it could be because you took an AP course or two and really pushed yourself and you didn't quite get the grades that you thought you'd get, or something of that nature. Question? So the question was, is there anything a student can do outside of school to improve their GPA in the summer or outside of the school day? So the answer to that is that Pembroke, if you take a course outside of Pembroke High School, like dual enrollment or an enrichment course, we will include that on the transcript with the grade. It won't count towards GPA. So you can get credit for it. We'll put that in there, but it won't count towards GPA. So GPA is based on your courses here. If you transferred in from another school, we will count those those credits. Or if it's an enrichment course and you're enrolled in PHS, or if it's an additional course while you're enrolled here, that won't count towards GPA. Do you guys want to comment on GPA?
So a little bit further on the GPA. We in the state system actually calculate our GPA exactly the way you do here at Pembroke, so there's a good chance that the GPA that's on your transcript is going to be very similar to what we would calculate, because we do still recalculate it. But specifically for us in the state system, if we do see that a student has taken a dual enrollment class, like at a college or a community college, we will add that into the recalculation. And we look at it as if it's an AP course. So if you get a B at a local community college or another college, we bump that up to a 4.0 and A and calculate that into that GPA that we're looking at, okay? And before I turn it over to colleagues if they had something to add, I just want to add a little bit more about the state system. We are part of the state system. We are here for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, for all of you. If any of you have paid any Massachusetts state taxes, if any of you have, maybe a couple over the years, we all thank you, because the taxpayers understand that, we want a public, education at the higher level for our citizens of Massachusetts. We want to make it affordable. We also, accessibility to us also means we want to make it accessible to you if you meet these standards. So I will tell you, in the state system, I mentioned I just met with the other deans and directors last week, we are looking for ways to admit you through this process. We're not looking for ways to deny you admission, okay? Now, I won't talk about my colleagues, but some other colleges do things quite differently, okay? And I'll use it. I was at Northeastern for a few years. They have a different philosophy. They are trying to get as competitive as they can. So they are spending millions of dollars to get their name out there and to get as many applications that they can into their system, truly so that they can deny them. So they can be as competitive as they can be and deny them, and then their class, they can say, look at how competitive we are. And that's fine. That's a philosophy they have. They're doing very well. Unbelievable, profile of their incoming class, but a very, very, very different philosophy than, again, the state system here. We set our standards. We're looking at your GPA. We're now looking, okay, we've set these standards because we feel that if you come to our institutions, you're set to be successful. You can succeed. You meet that minimum standard. So we're looking for ways that we can admit you. We're looking at your GPA. We're looking to see if you've taken, extra courses at a community college. We can bump your GPA up a little bit. We may be able to waive the SAT requirement. But again, I think a lot of you, as you start this process, you're all concerned and you think us admissions people are terrible people because we're looking at ways that we can reject you when when you apply to our institutions. That's definitely not the case here in the state system.
Just a few points unique to Stonehill and my experience, and I'll give Chris another turn too. So my answer is probably likely to fall somewhere between the spectrum of the institutions I'm sharing the stage with. I'm a little worried because we were called creepy and horrible people, and so I'm going to defend us a little bit here. We do recalculate. We take the weighting out, so we do not apply extra points for a GPA because it's received in an honors or an AP class. So we flatten everything out to a 4.0. This goes back again to every college you might be looking at. It depends. We're all going to have slightly different answers. Part of the reason why we do that is the flip side of the SAT optional coin. If we receive more than, say, 6,000 applications from, I don't know, more than 1,600 high schools across the country, there are 5.0 scales, there are 6.0 scales, there are 7.0 scales, there are 100-point scales, 110-point scales, 120-point scales. There is no consistency. So part of the reason for flattening out, and going back to my initial comment, GPA is always exclusively looked at hand in hand with which courses you took, which are the 5 core areas, over the 4 years, at what level. Those things are never separated. It's always within the context of each other, always, always. It is always also within the context of the high school you're coming from. And to validate what Chris said earlier, you're in a tremendous situation here. You have choices. You have open enrollment and drop a level of courses. It's not always the case. You're able to make decisions about which courses are best for you with the information and guidance from a tremendously committed guidance office. You're in wonderful hands, and in the grand scheme of college selection and the application and search process, you're in the upper percentages of the national conversation here. I'm probably getting a little bit away from the question itself, but again, within that context of the options that you've had, for some objectivity, the GPA recalculation for an institution like us is essential to making sure that you're getting credit for as much work as you've done, both within the context of which class you took and where your GPA might measure out within the context of an overall national pool. So.
And just to finish the conversation, you're looked at as an applicant from Pembroke is looked at as an applicant from Pembroke. So I know what it means if you're a 3.964 here. I have the context, and I'm not comparing that student with any other school district until I understand all that it means to be a 3.964 student at Pembroke. And there are a number of ways to arrive at a 3.964. You could have honors or not honors, or you could be A's or B's. And my last thing would be, I've read the high school pretty much since it started its reemergence, and I commend the high school for not giving into the grade inflation game that other high schools, both public and private, give into. I look at some schools where all they do is give A's, and then you see the standardized test of all the kids who have A's at these schools, and the standardized test is poor. And sometimes you wonder why they're giving A's to everybody. Are they awarding people on effort? Because that's not helpful for me. This place, you get a B+ here, and I might be telling people this because they see their kids, or if there's students here, you know, a B+ is a good grade here. And a B+ will not prohibit you from going to a college that you desire to go to that is fit for your intellectual ability. So I think that the GPAs are distributed very well. I think the system is a good system. I just think I think that's one of the things that Pembroke does very well. If you were to look at the grades, how they're distributed throughout the class, it's kind of even. It's not 60% or 4.0 and better. That's not real. The right number of people that are at that top level, and the right number at the next level, and the right number at the next level. It's very well done, and I don't know if it just happened that way or if it was designed that way, but I think in terms of grading, in terms of the structure within the school, for a college admissions person, it's a very easy place to understand and read, and I think it's real. In some high schools, I have a lot harder time to find out who are the real bright students. Here I can get it, and I can understand how it works within the building, so keep it up.
Thanks. All right. The next slide, we kind of touched upon it already a little bit, but I'll talk about it a little more, is standardized tests. So all colleges will accept SAT and ACT scores. I know we talk a lot about SAT, and that's just a product of where we live. If we were in Nebraska right now, we'd be talking about the ACT and that other test, the SAT, that no one's heard of much about. So so understand that those ACT and SAT scores, you can send one or the other to the colleges, and I'm pretty sure almost every college will take one or the other. Pembroke High School students typically take the SAT twice, once in the spring of junior year, preferably in May or June, and then again in your senior year. The data is pretty clear that if you take the SAT twice the second time around, you have a pretty good shot of increasing your scores. So we always recommend that students do take it twice, sometimes taking it that first time. Even if you have taken the PSAT, the SAT is a little bit different. Just getting used to the test and acclimated, and just being a little more comfortable with the second time around, and maybe having a little more math and English under your belt by the time you take it the second time as well. Could be possible reasons for the improvement, but we've definitely noticed in the data that for the most part, students' scores go up. Then there's SAT 2s or subject tests. Those should be taken at the more competitive schools, again in May or June of your junior year. So SAT 2s are 1 hour multiple choice tests in a specific subject. So you could take an SAT 2 in biology, you could take it in math, you could take it in English, you could take it in history, take it in French. Take it a lot of different subjects, and some colleges won't require it, some will recommend it, but others will require it. So it's going to vary from school to school. It's something you need to pay attention to when you're thinking about what schools you're applying to. And create a testing plan. Figure out when you're going to take the SAT and or ACT, and especially if you're going to take the subject test, you really need to figure out if you're going to take the subject test in June, then you should take the SAT in May, as long as it doesn't conflict with anything else going on, studying for an AP exam perhaps, or anything else going on in your life. So sometimes you might need to take the March SAT or another test date. So make sure you plan ahead a little bit so you're not caught taking the SAT 2s in, say, October or November when the material is not as fresh in your head. So if you're taking a biology, SAT 2, and you already took AP Biology your junior year, and now you're 6 months removed from AP Bio, you're not going to do as well as you could have at the end of your junior year. And you can register for the SAT and Khan Academy on College Board. So that's where you go, collegeboard.org, to register for the SAT. Then Khan Academy is a free SAT prep tool on College Board. And in our junior seminars in December, we got everyone registered on Khan Academy. So you can begin practicing for the SAT for free now. And then you can register for the ACT on actstudent.org. ACT, you know, like I said, we live on the East Coast, so we talk about the SAT a lot. And so I often get asked, should I take the ACT instead, or should I take both? So my answer, and it might be different from the gentleman on the stage with me as well, but my answer is that the ACT is a good alternative test. If, one, you don't test as well in the SAT. So there's two different types of tests. The SAT is more of a logic-based test, and the ACT is more of a curriculum-based test. So a lot of times, I'd say 80-90% of the time, you're going to do the same on both tests. Like, you know, if you compare the two tests, you're gonna net out about the same score comparatively. But, you know, 10, 15, 20% of the time, you will see a difference. Sometimes, you know, you might do worse on the ACT, but then again, you could do better. So if you did, you know, if you were a really good student and you know, a 4.0 GPA and your SAT scores just weren't what you would expect a student with a 4.0 GPA to have, then the ACT could be something you try as an alternative. And then you could just send the ACT scores and not the SAT scores, and that's fine. And another reason to take the ACT is just for a competitive edge. And so if you are applying to that more competitive school, if you take the ACT and do a little bit better comparatively, then you can just send the ACT scores and get that edge, so to speak. So those would probably be the two reasons that I would think that you could try the ACT. And the ACT has gained a lot of popularity in the Northeast recently. It used to be something that was, you know, that only a couple people a year took, and now I think it was around 20% in the last year for students taking the ACT. So it's definitely caught on in popularity. Some of the optional, the essay optional features, the not being penalized for a wrong answer on ACT is what probably created that surge in popularity, and the SAT changed last year. And part of the reason the SAT changed was to make itself more competitive with the ACT. So I know we talk about standardized tests already, but we'll kick it out to you guys.
Just real quick, the test sucks. Totally sucks. They're long, so you're tired. And if you don't eat before it, you're wicked hungry. And you get distracted by a pencil hitting the floor if you haven't taken it already. And the best preparation is reading. And I mean, this is free advice, no charge. I'm not charging. Find the most boring part of a newspaper. You know, if you're interested in sports, find the business section. If you're interested in the arts, find the sports section and read it. Read, because, I mean, more than 50% of the test is reading comprehension. And they give you college freshman and college sophomore texts, and it's about, you know, miniature turtle eggs in Costa Rica and what they're made of, and stars that are a billion light years away, things that you just, at 9:30 on a Saturday morning after a football game Friday night or after the prom, like, you're not into it, but you have to be. You have to be a good reader, because I would say more than 50%, maybe even 60% of that test is comprehension of reading. So it's not an IQ test, it's a college readiness test, whatever that means. But I think that you can game that system if you read. And I think what does a lot of people in is they don't prepare for it. They prepare for analogies, you know, like shoe is to foot as, you know, glove is to, you know, and they don't realize that it's going to be a lot more about drawing down things that you've read and finding the main idea or being able to defend an assertion in a paragraph. I'm telling you, read, and you'll do a little bit better than you thought you would. And a little bit better than you thought you would is going to make you feel a little bit better about the package that you're sending off to a college.
Do you have a question? Yeah. Correct. The question was about practicing now. So you can go on Khan Academy, and there's a free SAT prep feature. It's called Khan Academy. I think it's on the slide. If you go to collegeboard.org, there'll be a link to Khan Academy there, and there's a free SAT prep link for practicing. So we had them create a Khan Academy account and a College Board account, all the students. So the students have a College Board account, and they use that account to register. So they would register through their account, but they'd use your credit card to pay for it. Right. So the question is, from an admissions perspective, do you evaluate SAT and ACT scores the same?
The formats of the tests and the scoring reports are different. So the SAT is back to 2 sections, and it's one section is called evidence-based reading and writing. That's drawing out from reading pieces and answering questions on it. And then there's a math section, and that's a 1,600-point scale. The ACT is 4 subsections: English, math, reading, and science, which is reading, but mostly about science concepts. And those are, each subscore is from 10 to 36. And what you get is an average, a composite of the 4 subscores. So the tests themselves show differently. You could have a student takes the SAT, could get a 1,300, and then they get 32 on the ACT. And the 2 organizations, which are bitter rivals, do concord, meaning that all of us and you could see, if your student took both tests, which one was the better one, both in terms of the raw score and in percentile in the country. And that, if you wished, could control which scores are sent to schools. Why send a score that's not as good? I mean, I think that's a myth that we would hold that against a student, but still, if that removes all doubt, you can look at your student's result and you can say, your SAT is way better than your ACT. Let's forget about that ACT, and let's make sure that all the colleges get the SAT. So they present different. The differences are, I think you nailed them. I think for your science student, I think that the ACT does cater more to that science student, and but I think it still comes down to a lot of reading comprehension skills that is so important for certainly the college level. So they're kind of different. And ACT right now has 57% of the market share. So ACT is the bigger test internationally. That's why SAT made those changes that they did. Yeah, really no difference. For a lot of us, we recruit and work with different territories or regions of the country. I cover the Midwest for BC, and I almost see exclusively ACT. They don't take the SAT out in Iowa. They take the ACT. In fact, we have the MCAS here. Most Midwestern states require high school 10th and 11th graders to take the ACT. That's their state standard test. So they're ACT people through and through. I think Maine just adopted the SAT as their state standard test. So regions of the country, and that's what on both coasts, SAT is still king. In the middle, it's ACT, and colleges just adjust. And again, an officer that handles that area would just adjust to that.
All right. Next slide is on the college essay. So college essay is one of my personal favorites. I think it's often one of the more underrated parts of the college application. I think that a good or a great college essay can put you over the top. A bad one will never really hurt you, but it won't do anything. An average one won't do anything. So, you want to reveal a part of who you are. You want to make it personal, unique, interesting. So you want to show something on this college application that the admissions folks that are reading your application, they can't see on the transcript, they can't see on your test scores. You want to show something else about your personality that can come through on the application. It's important when you're writing the essay to try to be creative and think about, if you want to think about it from their side, they're reading hundreds of applications, and you want to try and stay away from kind of those typical themes. Not to say that you couldn't write about a typical theme if it was really impactful and you could kind of tie it into how it was so meaningful to you. But I noticed that, a lot of, we do an essay workshop in the fall, and we read a lot of essays, and a lot of students kind of fall into that, the winning the big game, having mono or breaking your leg or losing a grandparent. And again, not to say that, losing a grandparent or breaking your leg isn't impactful, it is, but when you're reading, dozens of essays on the same topic, it doesn't shine through. So you want to try and think of something that's impacted you, shows your personality, and kind of explain what you've learned from it or how you've changed. And it doesn't have to be a major life event. It can be, it can be any event, any interaction, any experience. It doesn't have to be a quote-unquote major one. Always have someone proofread your essay, parent, teacher, counselor. You definitely want someone to proofread for errors, the topic, making sure you are clear and the essay conveys what you want it to convey in message and tone. And then, the Common App has some general topic guidelines. Supplemental essays can be a little different and more specific. You always want to be aware of which colleges require supplemental essays to be best prepared. But like I said, Common App has some general prompts that are pretty vague, that can cover a lot of different subjects, and you can talk about, essentially pretty much anything you want in the Common App essay. You guys want to comment on the essay at all?
A couple quick notes, and we do essay workshops like you're going to have tonight. Oh, question? You want to start? Sorry.
Yep. I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry. Oh, on the timeline? So the question was about the timeline, about writing the draft of the essay. That's just a general guideline that we give on when you should start thinking about writing the essay. I think a lot of students wait till September, October of their senior year to write their essay, and they're kind of rushing through it and not really thinking it through. So, like anything, it should be something that you revise 3 or 4 times, and maybe even change your topic and change your mind on what you want to write about. And if you're doing it in October, then you're not really going to have that opportunity. So we want students to start thinking about writing their rough draft or coming up with a topic in the spring of their junior year and kind of working on it through the summer. Generally you're talking like 500 words on average, so 2 pages. So that could vary. There'll be supplemental essays that are shorter or longer. But for the Common App prompts and the general essays that that everyone's thinking about, you're talking about a couple pages.
I want to be kind of concise, particularly with essays, because they're a unique thing, and I think it's great that you're in an environment where you're starting this process early, and good advice already in terms of taking the time to refine and reflect on the topic. We do read a lot of similarly themed essays. Common App, right now, if you choose, you can go out and you can see what the prompts are, what questions you have as options to think about answering as you're reflecting on your junior years, thinking about your plans for the summer. So now's the time to think about it. Advance notice is I think essential in this key thing. A couple of other quick notes. From an admission office that has the luxury of conducting holistic admission and being able to place a certain value on the essay. A couple things. One, it should offer some insight into the student. Again, lots of essays about other people students have interacted with and such, but it should offer some insight into who that student is as a person, who they become, who they hope to be. Second point, in addition to taking the time to reflect on it, get the feedback that you need. So that you can make some confident decisions about how you feel about your essay as a student. And really, most time on that last sentence, be aware of which colleges require supplemental essays that you're prepared for. We see in the admission process a lot of students who wait until that very last minute, and there's going to be 1,000 different deadlines out there for all the different schools that you're considering. And some might require additional essays if you want to be considered for a scholarship or be considered for an honors program, whatever it might be. We often also, particularly among private institutions, require an essay about our institution. Right, so you've got maybe 4,000 different colleges and universities across the country that you can apply to. Some of our students apply to 5 schools, some of our students apply to 10 schools, some of our students apply to 20 schools. What got you on the list? Right? We know that essay can make a difference from the holistic, that Common App essay can make a difference. To the salutatorian who might not have done quite as well in the essay, we can look for that great story. But we ask you again, another question. Why us? Why are we on the list? Or it could be some variation thereof. It could be just an additional step to kind of qualify that application of it. We do it to get some insight into how well you're able to adapt to a question you might not have anticipated. How well did you prepare for your application process, or are you doing it the night before it's due? Are you able to create as polished a piece of work as the essay that you had a year and a half to work on before you actually applied? When we ask you that quick, maybe it's 200 words, maybe it's 150 words, about our institution or about you as a person or whatever it might be. And every school is going to have a little different variation. So again, another bit of a curveball that we throw out there for you, but it gives us an opportunity to compare and contrast and gauge what's your level of interest. Where are you at in your own college search process, either with us or at large?
So Joe and I work for Catholic schools, so a very common theme we get when you're working at a Catholic school is like the typical boy from Xaverian. I'll pick on Xaverian because I went to BC High, and say, I volunteer at the daycare to help the kids, but in the end, it's the kids that help me. That makes me want to stick a fork in my eye. But I'll tell you, just the other day, I read the coolest essay. It was a young lady from Las Vegas. Her name was Dakota. Dakota wrote about the fact that her father was a dumpster diver. Do you know what a dumpster diver is? So Dakota's mom is stationed at Nellis Air Force Base right outside of Vegas, and they've been there for about 5 years. And since they moved there, the father took up dumpster diving. And she goes with him constantly, mostly because the first time they ever went, she got a $5 bill in the dumpster. I guess in Vegas, which I learned through the essay, which is part of my reason I'm telling you this story, when people go bust and they have to leave town, they just put all their stuff in the dumpster. And you can get some high quality stuff in a dumpster outside some hotel or some apartment or whatever. So he's a dumpster diver. And most of the time, she talks about the adrenaline that you get going into that dumpster because you don't know what you're going to get. And you always come out with something. Well, wouldn't you know, one day, the father goes in head first, like he always does. She said all I saw was his feet. And he pulled out a golden box. A golden box. She said the adrenaline would have killed any other mammal but a human. They were so excited. They couldn't wait. They immediately left, covered in trash, dumpster sauce, and went back to their house. Because finally, after 5 years, they hit the mother lode. They have a golden box. So she describes it in detail, how painfully they went around the edges with a blade to open it as to not disturb the contents. And they thought maybe this was going to be something that's going to make them rich, something that's going to be in their lives forever. And they slowly open the box. Now, I've read thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of essays, and I'm like, open the damn box! Slowly opening the box. And they peel back the cardboard. And it's a dead cat. And she sums the story up by saying, sometimes in life, you get the dead cat. And, I mean, I literally could not stop reading this. I needed to know what was in that box. And I think the thing about this essay, which we all enjoy, is you get to tell the story. We can't tell it for you. And there's no shortage of subjects to tell the story. I mean, this was a cool thing that happened, but what did I learn about her? I learned what it's like to live in Vegas. I learned about her and her dad. I learned about the art of dumpster diving. I learned about all these little things and the tension and the story that was built. I couldn't tell you what our SAT was. Oh my God. I will deliver it. I will fly to Vegas and deliver this thing. That would be me in a gold box. But I mean, that's the impact. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Can you articulate a message about yourself? You're unhappy with your SAT? Tell this story. And it doesn't have to be adversity. It doesn't have to be, you pulled someone out of a burning car on Route 3. It could just be this moment when you pull back the camera, and it says a lot about who you are, what's important to you, what it's about. So don't dismiss what this means, because, again, I'm going to read 2,000 applications. I know her first and last name. I know where she went. I know everything about this girl. I can't wait to admit her.
So the next slide is on letters of recommendation. Typically, you want to ask 2 teachers for a letter of recommendation. You want to ask them in person, preferably as well. You want to ask a teacher where you're strong in their class and potentially aligns to your area of interests or possible college major. You want one of those teachers to be kind of from a core course, so like a math, English, history, science, foreign language class. You don't want to have, nothing against art, but you don't want an art teacher and a gym teacher, say, giving letter recommendation. They do want to, college folks do want to hear from teachers that see you in class in the core courses to get a sense of what you're like as a student in the classroom. We recommend that you ask the teachers, if possible, before summer break. I think for a couple reasons. One is to give teachers that opportunity to write a better letter for you. I think a teacher with time over the summer can write a much better letter than if you come to the teacher a week before your college deadline and you need a letter recommendation from you, you're just going to get something rushed and generic, likely. It's not going to be bad, but it's going to be rushed and generic, and it's not going to really give the college folks the insight they're looking for. So you want to ask early. If you really know the teacher that you want to have a letter of recommendation from, you want to ask them before the summer break. No, correct, after before senior year. So after the end of junior year, before senior year. School counselors also write a letter of recommendation as well, and we do that for all students applying to a 4-year college. We have on Naviance a parent profile and a student profile, and we ask that all juniors complete the student profile before the end of junior year. And then parents, you don't have to complete the parent profile, but some parents are interested in adding additional information, which can only help us in writing our letters of recommendation. So if you feel inclined to do so, please do. There's a parent profile on Naviance as well, and you just click on the link and answer the questions. And we use that information. All the school counselors read the profiles before they write their letters of recommendation, so it's very helpful for us. I guess, how important is the letter of recommendation?
Thanks. Just 2 quick things on letters of recommendation. My dad's been a high school teacher my entire life. When I got into college admission about 13 years ago, the first thing he said to me was, you better read these letters. He writes hundreds of letters of recommendations every year. Works at a big school. So the first point to validate, we really do read the letters. And your teachers put in a lot of time, and so asking early, I think, matters. I can tell you from having sat in the living room, my dad's been sitting there at his laptop banging out letters most of the summer. Summer's a great time for them to do this. So it's important to ask early, even though your application deadlines, again, just to validate, might not be until November, December, January, February of your senior year. It's important to ask early. Choose wisely. It does come across in the letter from the teachers. For those of us who have read hundreds or thousands of these over the course of our career, how well that teacher knows you. How invested you were in that class, and how hard you worked for whatever grade it might be. That's point 1. Second point, I read a lot of recommendation letters from the student who's applying to an English major, who took 2 years of AP English, and have a letter of recommendation from the English teacher who tells us they're an exceptional writer. That is not shocking, and nor would you expect it to be. So the footnote I have on this, when I get to the moment where as a committee, we're making some tough decisions in our room, and we're talking about how the counselor read the file and what they read and what they saw in those letters of recommendation, whether it be from the counselor or from the teacher. In particular regards to the teacher, if you're not a math student and your math grades are a little bit of the outlier in your transcript, or on the other side, if you're not the English student and your English grades are a little bit the outlier in your transcript, maybe you're the AB student and that's where the C's are. The letter of recommendation from the teacher that you did not do as well, the course that might be the outlier on the transcript, has a lot of value, because if you put in the time, if you did the work, if you persevered in the face of adversity, like you're probably going to have to at some point in your college career, that teacher can speak to it. If it's the first semester being a bio major and you're going pre-med and organic chemistry is not going that well, are you going to give up? Or can we look back and say, they weren't a math person, but they were thinking about science, and I know that they put in the time and effort. They put in the extra time to see the teacher before school, after school, asked questions during class, sat in the front, did the homework on time every single day. The teacher can speak to that. So whatever dynamic you have in the classroom, particularly with the courses that you feel as though are not the best representation of your readiness for college, no matter what your major is going to be, that's a good teacher to seek out. Or, footnote, as you go into your senior year, those are good teachers to make sure you have good relationships moving forward. That's all I got on Rex.
I'll just add a minor thing, because I would definitely recommend, especially that part of, I like to see letters of recommendation, as was just stated, from the class that you maybe didn't do as well in. But let me just go back a second. Do we read all of our letters of recommendation? And my answer is truly it depends. Okay, it goes back to that statement, because truthfully in our system, or what we're looking at Bridgewater, if someone has strong grades and has excellent SAT scores, chances are those are the students we don't spend as much time in the admission process with. We're going to admit them. So some of my counselors may read their essays and letters of recommendation. Some of us may say, well, let me move on to the next person. Okay, so I'm not going to promise you that we're reading every single letter. The ones that we spend the most time with are those ones that are kind of more on that we have questions about. We see some poor grades, but their overall GPA is okay. We see that their SAT is a little bit low, or they went test optional, and their grades are, again, okay, but maybe some questions. That's when we're really going to spend more time on those letters of recommendation and really look at that essay. Okay? Yep. So the question was about submitting a letter of recommendation from a coach or someone that knows someone real well. I think as we're looking at the different letters of recommendation, we like to see a little diversity in there, so we would like to definitely see one that's academically based, but we might want to see one that's more about their stick-to-itiveness or their personality and things that might come out from a coach or a different sport, as well as, of course, the high school guidance counselor recommendation too. So I like the diversity. So yeah, it's okay with a coach, but of course I wouldn't want to see 3 coaches, and then no academic, recommendation as well. Right. And most of your colleges that you're looking at, again, when you're checking them out, they'll let you know what types of recommendations they're looking for. Some may not require them. Some will say, well, we want this, and that, from a teacher, from a guidance counselor, that sort of thing. So just make sure, again, you're looking at the individual colleges that you're considering. Okay? Good.
All right, next slide is about school and community involvement. This is another part of the application that colleges will look at. And again, this is when, a lot of students could have A's and B's in the class. A lot of students could have a 3.5 to a 4.0 GPA and, 1,400 in their SATs, 1,200, 1,300 in the SATs. So when those metrics are the same, this is when the essay, this is when the letters of recommendation, this is when the school community involvement comes even more enhanced. So it's really important to get involved in an extracurricular activity, preferably inside of school. I always tell students to focus on the depth, not breadth of involvement. So you want to kind of show who you are. Are you in Key Club? Are you, do you play sports? Are you in student council? You don't want to do a little of everything, because an admissions person's not going to really get a good feel for what your interests are, what your passions are, where your focus is, if you do a little of everything. So it's more important to do a few things and be involved in those few things and kind of demonstrate what you've accomplished in these activities. So you want to show multiple years of involvement, so at least 2 years of involvement. So anywhere from 2 to 4 years is a good thing in the club activity, volunteer program, inside and outside of school. And then as a bonus, an increased involvement or contribution to the activity. So did you become president of the club senior year that you were in all 4 years? Did you become president of student council? What other contributions did you make to the club or activity over the course that you were participating in it? You guys have anything to add to that?
So what are we finding out? We're finding out that colleges want good high school students. What makes a good high school student at Pembroke High? Being the valedictorian? Well, you could be the valedictorian at the expense of things like this. Being the most popular kid at Pembroke High? Does that make a good high school student? Yeah, well, you could be popular at the expense of your grades and your disciplinary record. You have to have it all, right? You have to achieve things in the classroom, but not at the expense of your community. That's what good high school students are. They're good in every situation. They've won the respect of their peers. They've won the respect of their faculty. They understand what the mission within the building is about, and they've taken ownership and leadership and accountability in the building. I don't think we necessarily put one thing over another. If we run cross country, that's not better than being in the band, or the band isn't better than being an Eagle Scout. I mean, these are things that you get to exhibit what makes you unique and what you have a passion for. And who knows, something that you're going to have a part of your life for a lot longer. And we understand it all. Like, I ran cross country in high school, and it sucks. Like, no one goes to your meets. You're always tired and hungry. Like, but you build great character, and that's going to be with you forever. I was the editor of the yearbook, and it was the worst. They always changed the deadlines. They always cut my budget. There was a different software every year. It was the worst. But there were things that I learned that are with me all the time. These 3 institutions and countless others that are around you in Massachusetts, we're not just a kennel for smart kids to keep in cages. We are living, breathing communities that go 24/7. And the kind of things that you're going to do on our campus outside of academics, you're going to be activists and artists, and you're going to be involved in student government and leadership. You're going to play sports, and you're going to be a part of musical groups, and that's why you want to come to our places, because you see the passion and you see that on display all the time. So what kind of things do you do? And it's not just limited to this. It's work. If you work at Subway for 12 hours a week, you're accountable, you're responsible, you're professional. If you're a lifeguard all summer, that's not a joke, because what if that whistle blows and you got to pull someone out of the water? Lifeguards are important. Nannies are important. I have 2 little kids. Nannies should go to heaven. Forget about just go to college. What are the kinds of things that make it tick for you? What are the kind of things that give you a feeling of belonging to a community? Because that's what you're joining with us. You're not just going to class. You're joining these university communities. And I'll just say one more thing when it comes to this for me at BC is I always look for something called generosity of spirit. And generosity of spirit can be exhibited in a number of ways. It could be through service opportunities, and certainly there are plenty of Pembroke High or in the community. But it could go further than that. It could be your family. You could be the oldest of 5. And whether you like it or not, you need to have generosity of spirit, because you're driving people around and you're serving them mac and cheese, and you're the de facto parent for some of your younger siblings. Or generosity of spirit could be your grandmother lives with you and you take care of them and do things for them. You could have a special needs sibling, and the love and the grace that's in a house like that, and what that means to you going forward for the rest of your life. So there are ways that we can learn about that in the application through how you list it on a resume, or how you're talked about by teachers, or how you talk about yourself in an essay. Generosity of spirit is something that's important. It's important for all of us in college, but specifically when I read applications, I look for it. Have you achieved great things in your community and incorporated generosity of spirit and belonging? Or have you just put your head down and got the best grades you could? If you did, I think you leave some of these things behind, and that doesn't make you a really good high school student. So these things are very important, and I think all of us take comfort in the fact that you can balance all the good things that you do in high school with this. Like my 10-year-old son, I don't know, I mean, we go to CCD and hockey, homework, I don't know how he gets it all done. Imagine what a 17 or 18-year-old can do. I'm amazed by the things you do. We all are. So make sure we find out about these things, because it tells us a lot about what you're made of when you join our communities.
All right, now I'll turn it over to Ms. Goff, who's going to talk about college visits and college lists.
Okay, so college visits. Obviously, it's really important that you get out and visit the colleges that you're interested in. I like to give the analogy that you would never buy a car without test driving it first, and this is the first big purchase that a lot of these kids are making for the first time in their lives. College is very expensive, so it's really important to not only get on the campus and do a tour, but it's do an official tour. Register online and show up and do a tour. Colleges do keep track of which students are on their campus doing tours. I have a lot of students that come to me and tell me, I have a friend at UMass, I'm going to go spend the night, which is great. It's such a great way to go get an inside experience, but still, please register for that tour, so that way you're going to see all the classrooms and things that are locked and things that you wouldn't necessarily have access with your friends. February's vacation is a great time to go out and do a tour. April vacation's a little bit nicer because it's warmer, of course. And the summer is a decent time to go visit colleges, but you know, I prefer that students do go when there's actually students on campus. The summer's a little bit lighter. There might not be people in dorms, and I think it's a little bit nicer to see the campus when it's full in action. Like I said, April vacation's my favorite time to have students go out, so you can go online and you can start registering for those tours now. In the fall, there'll be tons of open houses that you can register and go to on weekends. It's a great time to visit as well. Next slide. So college list. That's a big question. People always ask me how many colleges should my child apply to. The average is probably about 8 to 10 schools. Last year I had somebody apply to 23. Thought that was a little excessive. But if you're getting free applications, you know, certainly take advantage and send them in. If you're paying for them all, that can get very expensive. I mean, they range in prices from, you know, some are free, some are $25, and they can go upward, all sorts of different prices. So it can get expensive. College, you know, when you're making your list, we use a program, Naviance, that's super helpful in creating what's called, we have a safety school, which every student should have. That's a school that you know you're going to get into based on your GPA and based on what their requirements are and their SAT scores and what you received. And then you have a target school, and that's where you're pretty sure you meet what their requirements are. And then there's a reach school, and that might be the school that you really want to go to, but you're not really sure if you're going to get in based on your GPA and your SAT scores, but also based on how competitive the school is. So GPA above. So we talked about safety school. Did I go over all of that? Did you guys want to chime in on any of that? You're good? It's pretty basic. Yeah, okay, very good. So we talked a little bit about competitive schools and the reach schools already. Oh, we're already on that. Pretty good. All right, so next, student athletes. If we have students that are interested in playing any sports in college, D1 or D2, they have to register with the NCAA clearinghouse. That's something that if anybody in here is thinking about doing that, you could go home tonight and do that. It's a website that you go to. There's a fee that you have to pay. You're going to upload all the courses that you've taken, and then you're going to ask us to send a copy of your transcript, and then we'll do that again your senior year for you. But you don't need to wait till your senior year to register. If you're thinking about playing D3 sports, you do not need to have any NCAA registration. There are certain requirements, so if you are considering D1 or D2, it is wise to go in and do that now, so that way you can make sure that you meet the requirements. We have the requirements listed here. 16 core courses and a minimum GPA of 2.3 for a D1 school. And for a D2 school, you need to have 16 core courses and a minimum 2.0 GPA. Oh, am I moving on to Jen? So community colleges. Community college is a great way to get your education at an affordable price. Two-year schools, Quincy College, Massasoit, Cape Cod Community College are some local schools that will be coming here for an admissions day. What we do there, when you're a senior, is you come in, you meet with the admissions representative, and they'll tell you on the spot if you've been accepted. A two-year school is pretty flexible in requirements. You most likely get into the school. They might be a little bit more competitive with some of the majors, specifically medical. You know, if you want to go to school for nursing, sometimes it can be really competitive. But you don't have to submit SATs. You don't have to submit letters of recommendation. It's pretty basic. All they want to see is that you graduated high school. It's a great way to fund your education because you can take part in the mass transfer program where you attend the two-year school for 2 years, and then you, if you have a 3.0 or higher, you matriculate right into a state school in Massachusetts, and you go for 2 more years, and you get your bachelor's degree at, you know, a fraction of the price if you had gone to that school for a full 4 years. I'm sure you probably have a lot of students that do that, yeah. So we're going to bring up Mr. Shannon next. Thank you.
All right. Just a quick question. How many of you guys, it's your first student going through the college process? That's what I would figure, more than half. Okay, the nice thing is I'm actually going through it with you as well. I actually have, my youngest daughter's a junior, but I've been through this process already 2 times with my 2 oldest students. So a lot of stuff I bring with my seminars, I tell kids real life experiences of what I've gone through with my kids. And I was just jotting a few notes down of things that weren't covered. College visits, when you do go on a college visit on a tour, make sure you leave your cell phone in your vehicle. Don't take it out. That's one thing our kids do constantly. When I do my seminars or whatnot, I see them taking their phones out. It drives the admissions people crazy. Okay? The other thing is make sure when you apply to a school that it's the right school that you're going to apply to. We do have students that apply to Bridgewater, Virginia, and don't realize it's that. Okay? Also, definitely go visit a school, like we said, because you want to see what's out there, what the school's all about. Visit it when the school's in session. Those of you guys who have been in my seminar know that when I talk about my seminar, I sent a kid out to WPI. I said, what'd you think about it? He's like, great school. I said, what didn't you like about it? He goes, no girls. 70% guys. Stop planning for a wedding. The other thing, you know, I sent someone out to another school out in Hampshire, and I said, what'd you think? They said they're a little too earthy, crunchy. For fun, they make their own granola. Okay? So definitely that. And the last thing I'd say that wasn't covered is fee waivers. All the students have taken the PSATs, and as a result of taking the PSATs, the College Board sells your information to colleges based on your major or what you're interested in, the size of the school or whatnot. And what they'll do is the schools will get a hold of that email, and they'll email you fee waivers. It usually ends up, I have Gmail, it ends up in my promotions tab, so I have to go searching for it. But my son, who's a sophomore up at St. Anselm's, he applied to 16 schools, and I paid for 1. And my rationale was if it was on the Common App, which he did fill out, I would just add it to the Common App, I would submit it for free, I'd have to send his SATs. And when it came down to financial aid, Siena and St. Anselm's out of pocket were actually cheaper than Bridgewater and Framingham. So I keep all my options open. Those are the couple of things that I've learned going through the process myself. My slides are real basic and generic. Postgraduate year or a gap year, if students decide to take a year off to fulfill something, it's not a year to take off and work at Taco Bell and kind of hang out and watch Scooby-Doo in the morning and get up and go to work. It's actually doing something. We had a student years ago that went to Senegal, Africa, for 5 months to figure out what she wanted to do. We had someone that volunteered for City Year. We had another girl who went out to California and did a program. Sometimes kids will say, I want to do the Peace Corps. Just so you know, the Peace Corps, you need a college degree, so that's not an option. You can do that afterwards. And what I've understood is that some kids who do a meaningful postgraduate year or a gap year, something that's meaningful, when they apply to an Ivy League or something, the acceptance rate's just a little bit higher than the average. I think at Harvard it's like 17% as opposed to 11%. And then technical schools is why you guys are all here to hear about this, is basically Technical schools are out there. If we do work with them. We take kids to Universal Technical Institute, which is auto mechanics. We also work with other technical schools around here. They don't require college essays. They're hands-on. They're more math and sciences and whatnot. We do cover that as well with students, because some students will go off and become an electrician. They'll go off and do other things. And we have those resources to point them to programs that would have that. And the last one is the military, which I am the military rep for the district. I've been doing it for 13 years. And this is this graduating class will be my 20th from working with Pembroke students, so I'm very, very well versed with the military. One thing I'd say is if you're thinking of enlisting in the military, you'd have to take the ASVAB. One common fallacy is everyone gets in the military, and that's not the case. When I was graduating from college, I took the ASVAB, and I sat next to a kid who was taking it for the 3rd time. They couldn't pass to get it into the Marine Corps, which has the lowest acceptance rate, the lowest number to get in. You actually have to take a test, and it's not like the SATs. It's broad-based knowledge, general, mechanical, electrical, all that good stuff. And more so what you guys would be interested in would be the academies. The academies, the Air Force Academy, Naval Academy, West Point. Okay, that you need a nomination. If you're interested in that, you should definitely see me. You would go off to, say, West Point. Everything's paid for. 4 years later, you'd get out, you'd be commissioned a 2nd lieutenant, and then you would serve for 4 years and then 2 years reserves. Everything's paid for. ROTC scholarships we have at our awards night every year. It seems like we have kids that get ROTC scholarships, Reserve Officer Training Corps. Basically, they get a free tuition for 4 years at a school that has an ROTC program. So they have a military component, they get free tuition, and then after they graduate, they're commissioned a 2nd lieutenant as well, and then they go off in the military and they serve for 4 years active, 2 years inactive. So it's kind of nice. 2 years ago, we had 3 kids receive it, and all the recruiters show up with a check that's about 3 feet by 5 feet wide, and it's usually the equivalent of $180,000 to $220,000 in education. Okay. They start to look for that in the spring. Yep, it's a little lengthy process. We work with Bill Keating's office. He gives our nomination. And over the years, we've had kids at the Air Force Academy. We have one now at West Point. We just had one graduate. We think we have one at the Naval Academy, and one just graduated. So it's a process. It's basically each congressman and the senators, they get to nominate. They have a list of nominations. If you are serious about it, though, you definitely have to make sure that if you get a nomination and you get an acceptance, that you would go to the academy. Years ago, this is many, many years ago, we had a student receive 3 nominations to three academies, and I was down at Mass Maritime with all the military guys that were down there for a night when Delahunt was in office, and they brought up his name. They said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Pembroke." And he said, "Oh, that kid, he got 3 nominations. Which one's he taking?" And I said, "Oh, he's not. He's not going to take one of them." At which point I barely got out of there alive because they wanted to kill me, because he took 3 spots from 3 other students that were in the congressional district. So it is a process. They make you do a physical test as well. You have to run the mile. You have to do push-ups, sit-ups, throw a basketball. You also have to be in fairly decent health. 20 years ago, I had one of my students go off to West Point. They did a dental check, and they had him fill 3 cavities. Okay? If you have any kind of EpiPen allergy or anything like that, you're automatically excluded. Okay, you can't go in the military. We always ask that. They pre-screen everybody. But if you are interested, definitely you have to see me within the next few weeks to start that process. And I oversee that. And if you are interested in the military, again, I'm the go-to guy. So any enlistments or anything like that, I help the students with. Any questions on any of this?
All right, just looking ahead real quick, I just wanted to kind of go over a few things that we're going to be doing. We're going to have an AP Program of Studies night on February 16th. It'll be in this auditorium at 6:30. So if you want to learn more about AP or about Program of Studies, please join us for that evening. We're going to have a course selection starting at the end of February, early March. So the Power School portal will open sometime around then for course selection. And we're going to be doing junior seminars on Naviance and use of data in March. And then individual meetings will begin in late March. So we're going to send invitations home the week of February vacation, where you're invited to a one-on-one meeting with your school counselor. So we expect parents to come as well. Last year we had 90% of parents attend these meetings. It was very well attended, and I was very happy to see that, and I'm hoping that'll continue to happen this year. We're also going to have a Naviance parent training coming up in the spring, so I'll send an email about that as the time gets closer, but we'll do a Naviance training for those parents that are interested in learning more about Naviance and how that works. And then finally, we have a job shadow day in June, which we piloted last year, and hopefully we'll expand upon that this year. So juniors, it's only for juniors right now, but for juniors based on their area of interest or possibly from the career fair that we have this spring, if they're interested in job shadowing someone, we try and set that up for June. So those are the things coming up. And then just a reminder to complete the exit survey before you leave tonight. I don't know if you guys want to speak at all. Does anyone want to say anything? Or I think we covered a lot of ground early on. So what's that? Yeah, so we can open it up to general Q&A. If anyone has any general Q&A, we'd be glad to answer any questions you may have. Yes. Yes, that's, you want to go ahead?
The question is, I guess you didn't see the flyer out front, so I'm not sure if they have all disappeared or not. So if it is still out there, grab it. But it is, I took that from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Board of Higher Education. So if you just Google Massachusetts Board of Higher Education, minimum admission standards, okay, when you go to the website, it's actually, I think, a 25-page document that talks about a lot of things, but eventually, you know, a couple of the pages are what I produced here, which talks about the academic coursework as well as the SAT. And I do want to make sure, as you guys are all doing your searches and your checkout website, and maybe you're checking, and even in Naviance, I'm not sure how Naviance is addressing this, the fact that the SAT that you guys are taking now is a new SAT. It's different than what the students a year ago took. So on your websites, when you're comparing SATs, you got to make sure you're comparing new SATs compared to old SATs, because they don't really match up exactly. So you have to kind of look at those. And so when you're checking websites, make sure you're comparing apples to apples and what they're looking for. And why I mention it is there's a lot of numbers on this, because it includes old SATs, new SATs, ACTs, and everything else. But make sure you're aware of that as you're checking websites.
Any other questions? All right. Well, our admissions folks will be down here if anyone has any questions, but thank you all for coming. Have a good night. What's that? Oh, if you could leave the surveys on the table as you exit, that would be greatly appreciated.